I'm Robert Martinez, state historian of New Mexico, and this is New Mexico History in 10 minutes. I've talked a lot about our Spanish Iberian roots here in New Mexico and our strong Pueblo and Genízaro heritage as well. But I want to say a little bit about our native Mexican Indian Mesoamerican roots because this is a very important contribution to the New Mexico story as well. We have to remember, New Mexico was colonized from places like Mexico City, Zacatecas, and other communities that had already been established south in Nueva España, New Spain, before New Mexico was colonized. So that's significant. And the expeditions were populated by Spaniards, but also by mixed blood people and Native Americans and people of African ancestry. They were also settlers, explorers, and colonists. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the indicators we have in documents about those people that came here and settled here and became part of our New Mexico history. We know that with Oñate in 1598, there were Mexican Indians. Some came as servants, some came as workers, some came as warriors. And we know that when Santa Fe was established between 1608 and 1610, the Native peoples were given their own community right across the little river that was in the area. We call it Santa Fe now. And it was called the Barrio de Analco. Barrio just means neighborhood or district. And Analco was a word from the Mexican Indian language that just meant over there across the river, which makes sense. You can still go there. That's where the San Miguel Chapel is and the oldest house in the USA. Although I think the Pueblo communities have older houses. I think if you go to Acoma or Taos or any of them, they have older houses. But still, this was where those natives were settled. Now, it's come down to us through stories and some documentary references that these were Tlaxcalan Indians. Tlaxcala was that community just to the south and east of what's now Mexico City. They were people that went to war with Cortez, first against Cortez, and then they joined Cortez to fight the Aztecs. So this community is part of the Mexican story in the 1500s. Well, the idea that only Tlaxcalans came with Oñate, in my opinion, is suspect. I have no problem with the idea that some of them were Tlaxcalan, but we have to remember there are multitudes of Native American communities in the Valley of Mexico in the mid to late 1500s. So I suspect there were other communities represented in all of those Mexican Indian groups that came up here in the late 1500s and settled here. Now, we don't know what happened to those folks. Clearly, they're living in the area. They have their own church. They have their own community, but they're obviously interacting with the Spanish population across the river, and they're working for them. They're working with them. Likely, they're having children with them. So they're part of the scene. They're part of the story. And then with the Pueblo Revolt, I'm not sure what happened to them. We don't have any indication that these folks are even still strictly Mexican Indian. They might be intermarried with Spanish people or with Puebloan people or other local native groups. But we know that by the 1700s, Analco is populated by Genízaro Indians, which are a different kind of people. But again, we don't know if they're interacting or intermarrying or making babies with the Mexican Indian population, but they're part of the story. Now, specifically, I want to talk about some of the women that came up with the Oñate colony. One of the colonists was a man named Juan Griego, John the Greek. He was from an island of Greece, and he ends up, if you can imagine this, he journeys to Spain through the Mediterranean, and then he ends up taking a ship to Veracruz, probably stopping in the Canary Islands, and Havana, Cuba, and then ending up in Mexico City, and then making his way north with Oñate in 1598 to settle in New Mexico. But by the time he does that, he's already married a woman named Pascuala Bernal. She's a Mexican Indian, and they are one of the founding families of New Mexico. Their children are half Greek and half Mexican Indian, and they're common ancestors to all of us. They end up marrying into the Gonzalez family, who are from Portugal, and they are first settlers of New Mexico in the late 1500s and early 1600s. Another woman that is significant in New Mexico history is a woman named Maria de Zamora. She's a Mexican Indian from the Valley of Mexico, and she married Bartolomé de Montoya, a man from Cantiana, Spain, near Sevilla. He comes to Nueva España, Mexico City, and married her. And by the time they come up to New Mexico with Oñate, they already have a few kids, and they're listed in documents as mestizos, as they should be, because they're half Spanish and half Native American. And they are also common ancestors to all of us. So we have to remember that this Mexican Indian Mesoamerican element is significant. It's part of our story. If we jump 100 years later to the 1690s, we know that some of the colonists that came to New Mexico in 1695 from Zacatecas, they're also part Indian. They're part Native American. They're probably of Chichimeca, Zacatecas, Indian area ancestry, and they're also blending with the local Spanish population in Zacatecas, and they end up coming to New Mexico as colonists and settlers, and then they marry the local population of New Mexicans and the Mexico City settlers who had come to New Mexico a couple of years earlier. So that's it. I just wanted to talk a little bit about our Mesoamerican ancestry because it's there. It's part of the story. It's blending with the Spanish Iberian ancestry and with the culture. A lot of our culture and language is Mexican Indian. We have words such as atole, comal, soquete, tecolote, guajalote, chocolate, tomate. These are very common words in our Spanish that obviously go back to our native Mexican and Mesoamerican ancestors. And that's the Spanish that the Oñate colonists were speaking. They were not speaking Spanish that was strictly from Spain. A lot of the Spaniards that came with Oñate were Mexican born. They're born in New Spain. And so they're also speaking the local Spanish that is a combination of Iberian, Castilian, and Native American words that blend and create a new language, a new form of speaking. So we have that influence. We have the influence of food. A lot of our food comes from the Mesoamerican traditions. One of my favorites is tamales. We know that some of those Zacatecas colonists were tamaleras, tamale makers, and that's one of the main foods we still have here in New Mexico. And I'd like to think that the tradition goes back to the 1690s. That would be pretty cool, right? So this is just to tell us and remind us that, again, we have deep roots here in New Mexico, and we have deep roots going back to Spain. We have very deep roots, strong roots going back into Mexico. Muy fuerte. All right, well, thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time. Hasta luego. Bye.